welcome to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon, and I am still deep in production on my animation project, agonizing over run cycles and in-betweens and frame rates, and it's time to take a break. So let's talk manga, shall we? You see, for Christmas, our very own Morgan did a good bad thing and gave me volume 1 of Ennead by Mojito. And apparently this started out as a webcomic. Now you, my dear viewers, will have to fill me in on how old this webcomic is. How long has it been running? Because I've been interested in webcomics. People have suggested that I produce my own, but I don't have the time. So you'll have to tell me about this. The reason why I'm asking is because I've seen artwork on DeviantArt years ago that was done in a very similar style to the way Set is done here. And so I'm curious, what came first. But either way, some of my viewers have also been well-meaning and, wanting to steer me clear of danger, I guess. And they said, this is a yaoi, right? You know what those are? My dear friends, I have known what yaoi is since many of you were babes in arms. And I was doing dealer tables at anime conventions in the early double aughts. So, yes, I know what yaoi are. But some of my other viewers may not know. Yaoi? What's that? So let me tell you. And then I'll explain what that has to do with Egyptian mythology and why you have a comic about Egyptian deities that is a yaoi. The word yaoi, of course, is Japanese. It was coined around 1980 by two female manga artists. And of course, manga, another Japanese word, means irresponsible images, basically. We had some artists in Japan, female artists, who came up with this term. It's actually an acronym for Yamanashi, Ochinashi, Iminashi, which means no climax, no conclusion, no meaning. In other words, hey, we know what we're here for. Sex scenes between cute guys. Boy-on-boy action or boy love. Shonen ai is another Japanese word for it. Or, another way you can think of it, is how our dear friend Scott McNeil, who is an English dub artist, he's Canadian, but he does the English dubs for a lot of anime. If you watched Gundam Wing, he was Duo Maxwell, Koga and Inuyasha. There's a long list, but he described getting a yaoi fan art piece of one of his characters to sign sometime in the early double aughts when we were doing cons, and he says this is what he was doing. There's a reason why they call it yaoi. So, what does this have to do with ancient Egypt? Why are we talking about a Japanese subculture phenomenon that has come to the United States and elsewhere? Because the contendings of Horus and Set. That's why. As a matter of fact, we have references in ancient texts going back to the Middle Kingdom that refer to Set trying to sexually dominate his nephew Horus. And the ancient Egyptians did not romanticize it the way it gets in yaoi treatment, but they did make reference to it. It's actually there. And I realized that, especially Afrocentric Kemetics are often, they take issue with this, but it's there. It's in the ancient texts. Check it out. Find the ancient literature. We're not making this up. They actually said it. But considering that these ancient sources, 4,000 years old, it was only a matter of time before somebody slashed these two. Enter Mojito. But before we delve into this, there's an important but fuzzy distinction that I have to point out that would really help some modern readers when approaching something like this. And that is the difference between religious myths and fictional narratives. A religious myth doesn't have to have a well-defined plot and dialogue and deep characterizations the way we would understand it today in the Western world, because those get supplied by the audience, the faithful who are enjoying those myths. And that would apply to modern pagans as well. Ironically, that's actually rather similar to yaoi stories that are being enjoyed by someone, and they have no plot, no meaning, as the original authors described it. You know, the viewer, the audience, is filling in the rest of that. On the flip side, you have a narrative, a story that has your, introduction, your rising action, your climax, your resolution, and some of the best known myths from the ancient world come the closest to that understanding of a narrative. If you think of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the contendings of Horus and Set, the Ennead, those are things that fit our modern understanding of a story, which, kind of gets traced back to the Greek epics. But there are a lot of other myths, especially in ancient Egypt, that, were cherished by the ancient Egyptians, but they're not as well known by modern audiences, in part because they don't fit that definition of a narrative with a finite plot. A good example would be the journey through the Amduat that the sun takes every night. So it's something that was a bedrock of Egyptian belief, but it doesn't, fit the Western idea of a narrative, and so, it's not as, people don't glom onto that the way that some of them have with the contendings of Horus and Set and the myth of kingship. There's also an important element of detachment that we as Kemetic pagans need to have when we approach something like this. Because we have to remember, while we worship the Egyptian deities as gods, here they're just characters. And the author treats them as characters. An important thing, especially when you think about the triumph of Horus as it's recorded in the Temple of Edfu, Horus is never really in any imminent danger, because this was a religious festival and they would have considered it magically dangerous to put that element of uncertainty into the story. Horus had to be victorious the entire time, or else, it could threaten reality. The line between the story and reality was very blurry. Whereas a story like this, you can afford to convey a sense of uncertainty and suspense, and you can do more things with the characters. And another thing to consider, if you think about modern mythology, how many different ways have we seen Bruce Wayne's parents die between film, animation, and comics? How many different Spider-Men are there? And don't even get me started on Transformers. These are all different iterations of a familiar story, and that's what this is. It's a different iteration of a story that we all know. And so we have to take it with a certain detachment, and maybe think of the characters in here, the deities, as actors, and they're acting to a particular script, but we just have an idea of where the story's going to go. So with that in mind, let's take a look. Bit of a spoiler here. There's no actual shonen ai scenes in Volume 1. So if you're a bit timid about encountering something like that, or you might have delicate minds, perhaps wanting to read this, Volume 1 is okay. You don't have anything like that in it. Now I can say that Isis is beautiful and sexy. I'll see if I can... And Osiris is pretty hot in here too, I have to say. So you have some beautiful artwork of Isis, she's as beautiful and sexy as, you might imagine, a goddess of her stature to be. Osiris is also nicely cut and very handsome. Set is also quite handsome, and he has this irreverent snark about him in his dialogue that really fits. And as I was reading it, I thought, I would love to hear somebody actually perform this. And, in the future, we might see if we can do some of that for you. Another interesting little bit of detail in here. If you look at Kid Anubis, because Anubis is a kid in here, notice the scarf that he's wearing. Keep in mind, if you will, depictions of Anubis in his jackal form. He's got a scarf very similar to this, so somebody paid attention to ancient depictions enough to give that little bit of detail to the manga form of Anubis. And what you see of him, he doesn't really say very much in here, but I have a sense that he's going to be a pivotal part of the story as we go on. The backstory is given in this very flat, sparse style that lets you know this is a flashback, and I think that was really well done. And overall, it generally sticks to the ancient mythology way better than a lot of other things. Let's not even get started about that horrible Gods of Egypt movie. This is way better by comparison. Bit of a spoiler alert. Two things I do have to say as I was reading issue 1. Sekhmet is listed as the goddess, or they just say god, of destruction. And it's actually her that suggests to Set that when he kills Osiris, he throw the body in the Nile River. But other things that they say through the course of this issue suggest that maybe she had intended that all along. She might have some ulterior thinking in this. I don't know. Maybe Volume 2 will tell us more. And we also know from ancient sources that Ra does have a female aspect, as Ra Itawi. So he has a feminine side, but damn, that's the sun goddess. So they have Ra as a very hot goddess in here. And it really has me curious, okay, where are they going with this? Because if you'll recall in the contendings of Horus and Set, there is a point in the story where a sulking sun god is cheered up by the goddess Hathor, who lifts her dress to flash her lady parts. Well, if Ra is a goddess here, could they be going for some Yuri? Which is, of course, the equivalent of yaoi with female. I wonder. But overall, I really like Volume 1. And yes, of course Set is the villain here. He's supposed to be. But I've always contended that Set is something of an anime villain, if you think about it. Someone that they introduce him and yes, he's a jerk. But the further into the story you go, the more sympathetic he becomes, and then, he sort of has reasons for being the jerk at the beginning, and you almost find yourself rooting for him at certain points. A great example of this would be Sesshomaru from Inuyasha. So that's kind of how Set is if you think about him in Egyptian mythology, and I bet they're going to be going for that with this one. We'll just have to see with Volume 2. But oh no! Look what came in the mail today! Volume 2. I am waiting to crack the seal with you guys. So let's get started. Now this is necessarily going to be a very brief reaction because I like to take my time and really soak in the graphics. So I'm going to be cuddled up with it later. But, oh hello! Oh, I think this is Hathor. Getting all flirty with Horus. I just haven't opened it. It's not even the first page, but yes. Oh my goodness, yes. And she's definitely got kind of an anime thing going here. I mean, look at her. I keep expecting her to go, kawaii! But oh, and Isis is really ticked off at something. Ruh-roh. So apparently with this one, you have the battle where Set and Horus go underwater and fight each other. And so Isis is, nervously watching. Oh, oh, this is neat. Newt, the goddess of the sky. That's kind of an interesting take for her. But, oh wow, wait, who's holding the instrument? I think that's Isis sitting there with an instrument in her lap, and it's funny. It's drawn sort of like a shamisen, which is a Japanese stringed instrument, but it also has similar proportions to the stringed instruments that Egyptian ladies would play. So that's a neat bit of detail, and that's something that I love. Is you have some little bits of historical detail in here that absolutely makes sense. Now, another thing to keep in mind about this is they treat this as though Horus is not yet a full-fledged god. He is the son of deities, but he has to earn his divine status, which, and again, it's a little different from, the ancient sources, because the ancient sources describe him as a god in the egg, which was their way of, saying, from the beginning, from the womb, he, had that divinity, being the son of Isis and Osiris. But, again, they're giving you an element of vulnerability and suspense in the story in order to make the payoff when he finally triumphs that much more powerful. So, we'll go along with that. And, so he's fighting Set, and yes, Set is kind of ticked off at Isis, but, that tends to happen. Another thing that's really interesting here is that Set is able to call up the forces of the desert, and he's able to, throw sand dunes and sandstorms and stuff, and, call up the earth, and lots of things that the way it's done on the page, you could just imagine it in animation, actually. I certainly can. And if some of you are going, hey, Sharon, why don't you animate that? I've got so much to do already. I actually have a different idea for animation that involves Egyptian deities. And that's something that I want to start working on after I get all this other stuff done, because I have a queue of animation, and I'm slowly going to be checking it off and clearing my plate. Really, I am. Because I have something great in mind. And, those lesser-known myths that I talked about, it's going to be in there. But one thing at a time. So, okay, I see, this is probably Kid Anubis, and you've got something kind of emotional going on with that. I'll have to read later and see. Oh, by the way, Jehuti, Toth, kind of has a, sort of effeminate, view. He's, referred to, I believe, as he, but has kind of, maybe I would say androgynous kind of look. And, again, it's something that in anime and manga and in that culture, they really have played with that for decades now. I mean, the whole idea of a Bishonen is a beautiful boy, and this is something that goes back to Japanese legend, and the idea of a boy who's so beautiful he could be mistaken for a girl. And even Scott McNeil has said at cons before, when he started dubbing for the character of Duo Maxwell, he's in the studio, he's got the cans on, the headphones, so he can listen and see when to do his lines, and he sees Duo for the first time, and he says, stop, you've got the wrong character, that's a girl. And they're like, no, Scott, that's you. And he said, gee, I'm pretty. So that's something that you had that kind of gender bending go on a long time over there, and I think that's something important to keep in mind when we argue about it over here, is that, artistically, you can make things a lot more fluid, and, I guess for those of us that are familiar with this subculture, it's not so much of a stretch. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. So, yes, Anubis is going to have a bit more of a reveal in Volume 2. There's a child that is similar to Horus. Not far from here, there's a child of a god who has not grown for hundreds of years. Yes, because as soon as I saw Anubis as a child here, without the headdress or anything, I thought, oh, what's going on with him? So apparently Anubis is going to have a little bit of angst and a little bit of development in here. And again, this is the sort of thing that you recognize the tropes if you're familiar with anime and manga. So I find it fascinating how they're applying that to Egyptian mythology. And lots of fun. By the way, Volume 3 drops in late July, so you can go and pre-order it on Amazon now. So just putting that out there if you're interested. And Volumes 1 and 2 are going to be about $35 US, thereabouts. So we'll have to see what goes on with it, but so far I have to say this is probably the best adaptation to a modern medium that I have seen so far. And that's, I don't know, most of them really are crappy, but this one kind of went way out there. I was like, hey, there are some other limited series that deal with Egypt, and there was one in the 90s that Vertigo Comics did, and I actually bought issue 1 back in the day, in 1995 or so, and then I didn't get the other issues until 2014. And you know what? What I imagined in my head all those intervening years was better than what I got on the page. And I'll tell you more about that in a future episode, but for right now, let's just concentrate on these two and get ready for the eclipse. Because I already have a hotel room booked for that, we've made our plans. I'm excited, and I'm going to do my best to capture totality on camera and share it with you guys. Now, they say that there are things that you can see in the sun's corona that don't get captured on film, very well, if at all. But I'll do my best to capture everything that I can and share it with you guys, and that will be April's Kemetic How-To Guide, is Total Eclipse 2024. I'm really looking forward to it. Now, in the meantime, of course, hit that like, subscribe if you haven't already. You don't want to miss our Eclipse special. If I get the opportunity to broadcast live a little bit, I will try, but I'm going to be working a couple of cameras as it is, and a pinhole projector box, so we'll do what we can. But I will take all the extras and all the other things that I couldn't talk about here, and those are going on Patreon. So definitely join our Patreon peeps, and I can also talk more about things like my animation project. I've been showing the progression of that and other original projects. I attempted a manga of the Myth of Kingship, and that was back in 2024. I have artwork and things for that, and one of these days I'm going to do some more with it. But if you want to know more about that, go on to Patreon, because that's where you'll hear about it first. And of course, give us a super sticker, and we'll do a mad happy dance for you. And when I'm done animating a Southern Redneck Family, I will do some animation for Kid Ptolemy and some other things so we can do more happy dances for you guys. All of that and more is coming up, so stay tuned. And for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon, wishing you Senebti. Enjoyed this video? Then be sure to hit like and subscribe to the Kemetic Independent channel. You can also buy my books on Lulu.com, and special thanks to all my Patreon supporters. Join us for updates, outtakes, and exclusive videos only on Patreon. Check the description for links.
Cannot believe what I'm seeing!